Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to today's Scrum Pulse webinar, Deciphering Goals, How Good Goals Can Lead to Success. And today our speaker is Ralph Jocham, one of our professional Scrum trainers. This is also brought to you by Agile Actors, and we'll talk a little bit about them as well. So let's get started. I'm Lindsay Belcina, and I'll be your host today. So some quick guidelines before we get started. So your microphones will be muted throughout the webinar. However, we want to take as many questions as we possibly can throughout the session, so please use the Q&A box to submit your questions. The session is also recorded, so don't worry, you will get a copy of the recording at the end within 24 hours, actually. We'll post it on social media tomorrow morning as well on the Scrum.org social channels. Just a little bit about Scrum.org, in case you aren't familiar with us. We offer training and certification for professional Scrum. Ken Schwaber, the co-creator of Scrum, is our founder. He founded us in 2009. We really pride ourselves on being consistent with all of our training from our 340 plus Scrum trainers around the globe. And we're really big on community. We have a great community within Scrum.org and on our website as well. So please feel free to check out our training, our certifications, and of course our free resources on our website. We have a bunch of free digital learning paths to continue your learning. So that's Scrum.org. And then I'd like to hand it over to George from Agile Actors just to give a brief introduction.
Thank you, Lindsay. I would like to thank everybody for being here with us today. We, Agile Actors, we are an IT services and learning and development services company. We are based in Athens, in Greece, but we offer services all over the world, practically. We are an Agile organization, so our people are in the core, in the center of what we do, and we try to help tech professionals become better professionals, become better at what they want to do by three things. One is their involvement in projects with our customers. Second is by coaching. Each one of us has a dedicated coach helping them to become better at what they do, and also through training. So what does this mean for our customers? First of all, we extend our customers' teams with professionals of the skills and seniority of interest, anything that has to do with a modern software development lifecycle. And then when it comes to training, we offer courses, learning and development services in general for tech professionals and modern software development teams, including, of course, agility courses. We are actually thrilled to be part of Scrum, the Scrum.org network since 2018. Offering Scrum courses, a variety of Scrum courses over the years. You can check on Scrum.org what are the upcoming. And we also do customized courses or services and consulting whenever needed. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy this webinar.
Fantastic, thank you. And we will hand this over to Ralph to introduce himself and get us started.
Okay, so maybe one last word about Agile Actors or Learning Actors. I've been giving trainings now, I think it is 9 years, and it's always been a pleasure. Right now, I don't have the chance to go to Athens that often anymore, but otherwise, great company, great services, great experience so far for me. So I have my own company, Effective Agile, now since 10 years, 10 years ago, I founded my own company where I give trainings, help companies to become agile, make the transition over to whatever they have to kind of more agile, Scrum-oriented working environment. I have global experience. Originally, I'm from Germany. I've been worked in the UK for a couple of years, then in about 9 years in the US, East and West Coast. Now, since 10 years, I'm back in Europe, based in Bern, Switzerland. So I've done basically agile all over different companies, different environments, regulated, not regulated, distributed, same time zone, distributed, different time zones. It works. That's just my experience with if you have the right mindset. I'm also a co-author of the best-selling book, The Professional Product Owner, which I wrote together with Don McGreal, which explains a little bit about what product ownership is really all about, and which also touches probably some of the topics I'm going to talk about today. And since now 11 years, I'm a Scrum.org trainer. I'm top 10 trainer, probably one of the first in Europe. So that's pretty much about it. So I've been there, done it, and collected over 20 years of experience in that field. So with that, we'll be moving over to, hang on for a second, we'll be moving over to a mural, which we have over here. So here you should see me just again. And there's also the book on there, but I already had my moment. So pretty much everything I'm going to talk about, I have also created a blog, which was published last week. So it's kind of deciphering goals, goes into the same way as well. So if you want to reread something and don't want to watch the video or something, you should have pretty much the same information there as well. Now, goals. We have so many goals in Scrum. We have the sprint goal. If you work with Nexus, our scaling framework, you have a Nexus goal. Now, the new version of the Scrum Guide introduced a product goal. Then we have company goals. And it's like there's so many goals. And somehow I often see is that people get lost in it somehow. And it's not really like, what do they mean? What are they good for? How are they're interconnected? And for that, I'll just want to dive first into what I like to call the product management onion. And I'm just opening up. Now this is a little bit of interesting because I just opened up my mural on my iPad and it is trying to reconnect, which is not what I want. Let me give it one shot, otherwise I have to improvise here quickly. Restarting the app. Here we go. That did the trick. So what we usually observe is, or what I absolutely see in, I would say pretty much all of the places, is that every organization has a company vision. Where do they see themselves in 5 years? Where do they want to go? And based on that, they derive a business strategy. Now, based on that, let me explain it different. Down here, we then often think about delivery and validation. Think about it, this is a sprint. Yeah, at the end of the sprint, we have a working product, which we can show, validate essentially. Before we go into a sprint, we think about how can we value and solution discovery. Yeah? What is the best possible product we could be building, best possible features, and how can we actually make this happen? Discovery. Now that's often what we do in Scrum in the refinement and sprint planning. Now there's a little bit of this disconnect here, and this is often what we see in organizations, is that there's this vacuum. Don and I, we call it the product management vacuum. It's like, and that vacuum has a strong need to fill itself. And if you're not careful, it fills itself with milestones, charters, reports, classical project management activities. But what they observe is pretty much only process compliance. Now, design is never late. If you have 3 months to draw boxes and lines, you're done after 3 months. You don't know if it's right. You didn't have the chance to really validate it yet. But basically, this is then where once you have understood what this means from a product owner perspective, if you have understood the company vision, if you have understood the business strategy, you can come up with a product vision. And once you have the vision, you can think about, how can I actually make that happen? what do I do first, next, and so on. You would come up with a product strategy. And once you have that, you would then basically go to the developers in your Scrum team and just say, this is what I need, and essentially repeat the same story up here. Now, instead of just getting something you execute on, you would get a chance to talk, to understand, and then you would give the same chance to talk and understand to the developers. And that's kind of like how we conceptually think this is product management should actually work, looking at the flow of information and understanding. Now, what we have here as a graphic is from the EBM guide, evidence-based management. We actually talked about it last week. And essentially, think about the strategic goal. That's the goal which is really far out there. You might not ever get there, but you still think it's worthwhile. Let's go there. And you have then also your current state, which is kind of a sequence of small steps along the way. And then you have always your intermediate goal in between. So now we have a strategic goal, we have an intermediate goal. Again, talking about goals, how do they fit together? But essentially, at every position on this journey here, you would essentially come up with a hypothesis, you would come up with an experiment, you would run it. An experiment could be really an experiment, or it could be a working product. You would build that, you would inspect it, learn out of that, and make adaptations. Sounds familiar. Transparency, inspection, adaptation in Scrum. Now, let's go back to this onion and let's try to put this together, because in EBM, we also talk about 3 types of goal. We talk about a strategic goal, which I think is probably somewhere further up here, because that's what we want to do. Like, yeah, that's further out there. But then we have this intermediate goal, which we have also here. Like, what could be the next stepping stone towards our long-term strategic goal, or maybe our vision? So that would be then placed here. Now, the problem often is that strategic answers are fairly easy, I would say. And if I do injustice to someone, please accept my apology. But strategically, I can solve COVID. Just make people stay at home for 2 months. Everything would be fine. But how do you really make that happen? And this is where the immediate actionable goal. How can you really make it happen from a tactical level? How do you get the rubber on the road to really make this happen? So essentially, this is how we can think about how those different levels, like from a strategic goal to something in between to a more tactical, actionable goal. How can you really make this happen? Now, if you look more at a strategic goal, sure, we talked about this already. So up here, we would have maybe the vision statement of an organization. We want to be as easily and accessible and available as drinking water. This is for Uber. Now, they just say we want to make transport as easily available as tap water. This is the word they're using. Now, once you have that, you can come up with your business plan, which is essentially your business strategy. Let's do this, let's do that. Then based on that, you should probably come up then also with your product vision. Now, once you have your product vision, well, that's a great product, but it ain't happening overnight. So we have to think in a sequence of steps. So then your roadmap comes into the picture. Based on that, you could then come up with your product goal, which is new in Scrum, which I really appreciate because it helps to fill a logical gap, I would say. Then we would have our sprint goal based on that. Now, if you work in Nexus, you would probably have a Nexus goal instead of that for your Nexus around that. And then down here, kind of in the context of our daily sprint, our daily planning. Now, there are 2 instances of those goals which I think are interesting. For me, one is the product vision, because for me, the product vision is the linking element, the glue between strategy and intermediate. Because somehow you have to make this stretch. Strategy, okay, this is what we want to do on a strategic level. Now we have to make the first step towards how can we actually act on that. And that's the product vision. Once you have a product vision really described, written down, understood, you can think about how can we do that. And then you come up with a product goal. And again, the product goal is now the link between intermediate to tactical, actionable. And The Scrum Guide basically tells you now the product backlog. Oh no, excuse me, the product goal is in the product backlog. So the representation of what we want to achieve in the product goal is reflected in the product backlog. So, and it also states that a product goal is either achieved or abandoned before taking on the next one. So essentially there's always one product goal per product. And this provides one of the values in Scrum: focus and commitment. So there could be a sequence of product goals as you work through that. Now, looking at all those different goals, we can just say now a company vision is very strategic. And then for this, we usually use a vision statement, maybe some other ways, but I think every company has their own format in that regard. Then business strategy, which is again very strategic. For this, I personally like to use the lean canvas. Some people prefer the business model canvas, or maybe something else. Now, if you think about goals in the context of Scrum, it's a minimal framework. Bring in practices which help you to achieve what you actually want to achieve. Now let's talk about the product vision. Elevator pitch, product box, working backwards. These are all things which are helpful practices to go there. I personally, I'm a big fan of 4DX, the 4 disciplines of executions, the widely important goal, the so-called WIG. Again, this is something where, it's further out there, but it's attainable. It should be fairly realistic. There might be still some unanswered things here and there, but overall we feel like, okay, it's achievable, it's great, it's really awesome if we achieve that, and it fits good into the vision, the strategy we have in our organization. Now, the product goal, again, this is more like classical explanations about how we can, like a stepping stone towards the vision you want to achieve in regards to your product. And actually, I also went ahead and I created a product goal canvas, because often people really know how can I approach the product goal. So I maybe put the link on the mural later on as well. But I created a product goal canvas, which helps you to think about what you really want to achieve. And then basically, the sprint goal, that's really actionable, because the sprint goal is tactical. That's what we want to achieve in the next 2 weeks, for example. We want to have this version of the product out there. And this is really, for me, how things logically fit together. And it's like, on a kid's playground, those monkey bars, where kids kind of dangle themselves forward and grab the next band. I think if we wouldn't have that clear sequence about how things are interconnected, we often just get stuck and we get busy doing something which isn't really helping for something we really want to achieve. Now, usually I really observe that if I go to a company and they struggle, they don't have a goal, they don't have a sprint goal, they're really busy all the time, but now people don't show up for the sprint review because they don't have a proper sprint goal. It's just like busy work. So there's often like so many symptoms around. You can see that if an organization doesn't have a clear product vision, what is causing that? If you don't have a product vision, you will not have a good roadmap. How can you build up good product backlog? How can you actually do proper refinement if you don't have a roadmap? I'm seeing those problems again over and over. So I think really having understood like how the company, the product management onion links to different levels of goals, from a more strategic to a more actionable tactical goal, and then basically which practices and how it's intertwined and linked within your organization.
Ralph, we're starting to get some questions coming in. We have one around roadmap, but before we get into that, would you mind zooming in a little bit more? We're getting a few
sure, no problem at all.
Zoom into the charts there so that they're a little more legible. So Alexandra asks, is a roadmap really necessary, as we are supposed to work in an empirical way and make decisions and change directions as we learn more about the product? Could it be that the roadmap is very high level? So can you go into that?
Yes, I would like the roadmap. Great question. Thank you for that, Alexandra. Yes, I'd like the roadmap to be high level, because if the roadmap is really detailed, sometimes I go to companies and say, yeah, we have the sprint backlogs for the next 20 sprints laid out. They're still sprinting, but everything is fixed before they even start. And that's not agile anymore, because responding to change over following a plan, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So the roadmap is really more like, hey, it would be good if we can be there in 3 months would be great if you could be there in 5 months. If something comes up, you make adjustments. That's a roadmap. I mean, if you, in reality, if a bridge has fallen down, you take another road. Yeah, you have to get to the destination somehow, but you might change the way you go there.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I'm just looking at, okay. So now, I guess most of you have also heard about that goals should be SMART. And there's this acronym for SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And I think SMART goals are good. But should a strategic goal be SMART? I'm not so sure about that. And there is the, which I think Google and Adobe came up with, they call it FAST goals, basically frequently discussed, ambitious, specific, and transparent. And I think FAST fits better for the goals which are more strategic, higher level. Now let's look at the vision statement. Yeah. That's specific and that's measurable. But is it attainable? We don't know yet. Is it realistic? We don't know it. Is it time bound? We have some expectations, hopes, wishes, but is it really happening? So, but now if we look about, let's say we have a really ambitious company vision, it's like, well, we probably should look at it again and again, because isn't this where the whole company is getting oriented towards to achieve that? So if we don't bring it up again and again and always keep it in front of our heads, essentially, to look at it, talk about it, we've just probably have the risk of falling back to being busy. Ambitious, absolutely. If a goal is not ambition, a strategic goal, why do it? Why playing safe? Because if you play it safe all the time, the competition might just outcompete us in no time. And it's specific and it should be transparent, yeah, understanding for everyone to understand what's going on, where are we going. Now, the same thing, I think, for a business plan. Fast fits better. Now, a product vision, yes, that should be attainable. Now, how would you build a product if you don't know if, I mean, sure, things can happen, things can blow up, but overall, we think that now seems realistic. Let's go for it. Same for a roadmap, but now a product goal, I think that absolutely has to be realistic. Because if there's a product goal out there, we just say, oh, we don't know if this is possible. Again, things can happen now, unexpected, but overall, a product goal is realistic because that's really where we dive into sprint for sprint to achieve. And I think a sprint goal, daily goal, absolutely. Yeah, this is also then time bound. This is kind of like, but you can really see, I think that fast applies in all of those. Maybe ambitious, maybe a sprint goal is not that ambitious anymore. It's more like tactical, but overall, yes, I think. So for me, it's like the combination of maybe understanding SMART goals are great where they make sense, where they don't think about fast goals. And make sure that if you talk about goals in the meaning of being fast, really discuss them frequently, keep them ambitious, specific and transparent.
Someone actually just asked, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on this, why the A is optional in the sprint and daily goal.
No, it's not optional. For me, it's more like, is it applicable? Like, for example, here in a vision statement, I just wrote down it's specific and measurable. So I haven't written down, and I just put it here in brackets because it could be, it doesn't have to be. So it's not that you choose to be, it's just like, how applicable is it? So a daily goal in the sprint daily scrum, when people say, oh, let's achieve this today, this would be helpful because if we have this, then we can do this and this and reach our sprint goal. I think this is probably ambitious, but maybe in some cases it isn't. But you maybe just take out the brackets. I mean, I put this in actually yesterday when I was going through that again. I think maybe I should take out the A once in a while. So that's why I put it into brackets.
Okay, cool. Makes sense.
Okay. So now let's move on a little bit and let's go over here. So now again, if you think about it, how do those fit together? And especially the product goal, there's so many questions about that with the update of the Scrum Guide in November last year. It's like you can think about, if you go back to this onion, that your product goal is probably connecting again the product vision and the strategy of the product. Then you would think about creating a product backlog. Now, the product goal reach is kind of like from the vision down to the beginning of the sprint, because once we go into the sprint, we are more tactical through our sprint goals, sprint backlog. Now the product backlog gets created up here, is not that much present, but the further down you go, the more present, the more important. And this is again how refinement brings in clarity and the understanding of your product backlog and the elements in your product backlog. And all of this happens through your refinement, which you will be doing. Then you have your sprint planning, you create your sprint goal in the sprint planning. The developers create a sprint backlog. Then in the daily Scrum, they will assess how they are doing. And at the very end, we look at the sprint review. So for me, again, this is also often something I get good feedback about. Okay, now I see how things are correlated. Now, why is a product goal a good goal? And I mentioned this before already, because it ties together, it puts something in between the vision and the sprint goal. Because the sprint goal is very strategic, high risk. It's far out there. Now a sprint goal is very tactical. It's very close. So, but there was this long stretch in between. And I think people often weren't really sure about, just the product backlog, does this help? Does it really? And now there's this product goal. It's just, you know what, there is something you should probably, in regards to your vision, aim for that. And that's the product goal. And you might have smaller product goals more frequently, a little bit more tactical. Maybe you have product goal more on the strategic side. That's something you have to find out for yourselves. But again, there should only be one product goal at the moment, which you either achieve or you abandon before you take on the next one. Often what we also see is that I talked about this vacuum early on, and I think often the problem is that if the goals are not really connected, and often we see like the understanding of what product owner is doing, they are down here on the delivery and validation tier. What we often see is up here, there would be maybe a product manager or someone else who tells you, do this for me, and pass it down to the product owner on the delivery validation layer. Now, you as a product owner, you get something put into your hands. You have no idea, or maybe you have some understanding, but not enough understanding to really understand what it means. So you would just execute on it and hope for the best, do probably hard work. Now, the problem with that is that this person, you as a product owner down here, you would not really appreciate what the person up there is really wanting to achieve, because you haven't really understood the big picture. And the other way around, this person wouldn't really appreciate what the struggles you have as a Scrum team, as a product owner, as the developers doing the work. Because now, doing the work, we do complex work. It's not just programming really fast or doing something else. It's cognitive, complex work. And there are problems we're running into, and we have to find creative solutions for that. Now, the way you can think about product ownership in that regard is, and how it also really helps to bring those goals closer together, is it's this thin slice through all of those layers. So you as a product owner, you are basically responsible to make all of this happen, because you as the only person are accountable for the product. Now, essentially, you can think about it this way. So your intermediate goal would be here, like going back to what we had before as well. That's what we want to achieve. Now, based on that, you can come up with, based on the roadmap and the product strategy, with your product goal, and then delivery validation that will be linked to your sprint goal. Now, let me just bring this to the front. Here we go. So essentially now, as a product owner, it's probably a big challenge to be active on all of those layers. And you probably couldn't do all of that. So you probably mostly will focus on that one here, more the things at the top, which are more relevant for the product. Excuse me, let's just take a sip. But the work down here still has to happen. And this is where then you as a product owner would talk about the goals, what's important, why we're doing things, to everyone else in the Scrum team. And then once they have understood it, they can take on most of the work here as well. Again, and this is also for me intertwined through kind of good goals set together, talked about frequently communicated. Now, goals should be important. If you do something which isn't important, the question is then always, why do we do it? Then I like the model we have here, the 8 steps model from John Cotter. And he says the first thing we have to do is to create a sense of urgency. Now, this is organizational change. This has nothing to do with product development per se. But if there's no sense of urgency, people just often lean back, work. And I think urgency for everything we do here, through this onion here, or everything we do here with our strategic goal, I think there should be some urgency up behind that. This is important for that. If we do this, we can help so many people. If we do that, this would only take half the time and benefit so many other people. And I think urgency is really important because it really motivates people. It makes people focus, work together, solve complex problems. But often, the other thing what I also see is a little bit off topic here is that urgency is being replaced with management by fear. And that's not the same thing. Fear and urgency, totally the opposite. Urgency engages people, motivates people, make them achieve things they haven't managed to do before. If you do forced stack ranking and other review systems and put fear on the people, if you don't deliver by that date, you will all be fired or something like that. That kind of ruins many, many things. But now once you have this sense of urgency, it really combines and brings everything together. Because for me, this is the thin thread going through all those different layers, combine, also connecting the goals we have and make good things happen. So goals on a higher level, they inform the lower levels about what's important, and inform not just like we give something down, you execute it. It's more like, hey, let's get together, let's talk about it. And basically then down here we have delivery and validation. So validation would be feedback about, are the features right? Is the technology right? Do we have the right skills in our team, the right processes, right tooling? And all of what the learnings are basically, then they enact backwards up there. Because everything we do, again, should be based on empiricism, guided by experimentation and learning. Because even if we could come up with all the best goals we have here, something like that, and still act in a linear way, and then be surprised why it's not successful. Now, this is not a linear process, really. It's more like, okay, there's always feedback loops. In a daily Scrum, we have a daily feedback loop to reaching our sprint goal. Now, every sprint is a feedback loop to how are we doing in regards to reaching our product goal. Each product goal is kind of connected to the product goal before and afterwards in the bigger picture of what we want to achieve as our strategic goal, our company vision. So even if I explain it in a linear way here right now, it isn't. Okay. Are there any other questions which came up?
Yeah, there are a bunch of questions on that.
Okay.
And this one is regarding the sprint goal. So how would you set your sprint goal when you work in multiple products in the same sprint?
Okay. You know what I like about Scrum is it's this huge mirror making everything transparent. And I think if you have a struggle coming up with a sprint goal, that's not a problem of Scrum. It just makes something else transparent. So if you think about this, let's say here we have this 2x2. Here we would have the number of products you're working on. Here the number of teams. Let's say one team, more than one team, more than one. So one team, one product, that is classical Scrum. No surprises here. So you would have this one product backlog, one team, and one increment at the end. Now, if you have a large product with several teams working on it, that's where we would say Nexus, basically scale Scrum. So you would still have a product backlog, probably a little bit larger. You would have several teams working out of this one, but still only one product at the end, where you would have, again, only would have one sprint review to look at it. And this should be a magnifying glass. Now, several products, several teams, that's where for me portfolio management is living in an organization. And I would expect that a company has a portfolio backlog, which they also constantly refine and find out what is the most important one, what do we have to do first. And then out of this portfolio, you would take elements and then bring them into one of those teams, either in a Nexus setup and a Scrum setup. And once they're done, they will take on the next one. If I have 10 teams, I can only work on 10 things in parallel, not 11. Otherwise, I go into this threshing mode. Now, what do I have at the bottom right? Yeah, several products, one team, and that's when I like to paint this guy here. That's not really where we want to be. Now, why? Looking at the Scrum values, yeah, one is called focus, and one is called commitment. Now, in this case, you will need neither focus nor commitment, because you will not commit to several things which you're not really sure, can we do that? And you for surely will not get focused because you get always kind of just jumping around, doing this, doing that. Now, I know that most companies are, many companies are in that situation. So a way you can try to cheat yourselves out of that is to, for one sprint, only work on one product. I have a good sprint goal for this product. We will build this, so people will be able to do X, Y, Z once we're done. That's a good sprint goal. That makes people show up for the sprint review. Okay.
All right. Thank you for that. Let's see. Lots of great questions. Please keep them coming. Do you have any recommendations on portfolio planning? How to install, for example, how to install accountability for a PO on a product vision?
Yes, I think for me, portfolio is like, now, I really want to see a portfolio backlog in an organization. Because if everything is important, nothing is important. If you say yes to everything, nothing will really happen because you just jump all over the place. You have the threshing going on. And I think really have this portfolio at which you look again and again, refine it, break it down and say, oh, this is an awesome idea, but this is going to take long, cost far too much. So is there anything we can break out, which is kind of, let's call it an MVP in that regard, like something we could do first. And then give it to one of the teams or maybe several teams if you have a Nexus setup and wait until they're done. It's like the product goal. It's either achieved or abandoned before you take something else out. Because if you just give work to the teams, they start to stamp out fires all the time. They will not have the time to commit to work concentrated, focus on one thing at a time, and really productivity will go down really, really fast. You will not imagine how fast that happens. And you don't realize it really until it's kind of like, wow. And for me, this is also linked about having if the teams cannot really work on one thing, this is also often a sign that you don't really think in the right products. Now, one of the first sessions I do every time I join a company is like, what are your products? And this is a really challenging question. And I normally don't know the answer because I'm not the domain expert. My company, the company I join usually is. I usually ask many questions, and through these conversations, I try to help them to understand what their product is. And there's probably not the best answer. There are good answers, and you have to find one way which is working for you. What we often also see is that, for example, if I go to a bank and I want a loan because I want to buy a house, then the loan is the product. A product always solves a problem. I don't care about that they have a transaction server running in the background and an interest calculator, microservice and something like that. But in their own rights, these are also products. But it's always about finding the right level of a product. And often what I see is that if too small, not even products, but components and widgets are considered as products, you have so many of them and not enough teams to take care of them. And then again, you end up here in this area. So it's finding about the right level of abstraction. For me, it's about following the value stream in your organization. So where is the end user who benefits by using the product, either by having a cost saving or is willing to pay us for the product? And that is the person we have to make happy. That's the most important stakeholder for us. And then find out what is the value stream. And then you have to encapsulate that value stream and make this your product. And that's, again, a big challenge for most organizations, because we break problems down into our organizational hierarchies and structures. Well, this is done over here, this is done over here. And then we have all this dependency management and, the problems of classical organizations. But if we turn this around, if we just say, this is our value stream, let's build a team or a set of teams working on that and have them encapsulated. Now, by definition, they can become agile.
Great, thanks. This next one is around the roadmap again. What do you advise if there's no roadmap in place or intention of introducing a roadmap at a company? Are there reasonable alternatives that can serve similar purposes?
So for a roadmap, I have not a specific format. I have used story maps as a roadmap, and I've done really, really well with that, because the story map describes the product. This is what we think first release, maybe next release, if nothing changes, we could do this as well. Now, I think a roadmap is really, really important, because I'm personally convinced is that refinement is pretty much always. I didn't have a case where I didn't have to have refinement. I had one case actually, but normally I always do refinement. But I think, how can you refine? How can you forward look and work with your product backlog if you don't really know what's actually the next thing for us to achieve? And this is where the roadmap comes into the picture. And if you don't have really a clear roadmap, and you can even think about a roadmap, don't think in a classical roadmap, but I think even we would have a roadmap of your product goals first, next, if nothing changes, this one. But then once you are in a product goal, and let's say this is half a year, 9 months out, what could be the smaller roadmap? Sometimes there's a recursion happening. What is the smaller roadmap for that product goal? And this gives you guidance for what should we talk about? Now, missing roadmaps, I think, is a big impediment for having proper refinements. And if you don't have proper refinements, you're not really ready at the beginning of the sprint, and suddenly you're surprised you're not really done at the end of the sprint. And guess what happens? The next statement is, well, Scrum doesn't really work. I'm afraid if you don't do it right, it will not work.
Okay. This question comes from Philip. It's around the product goal. If I fail to communicate a tangible product goal to the developers, what tools or methods can I use to work on the product goal?
Okay. Give me just a quick second. Let me just throw this on here. I was having the same question, like, oh, product goal makes sense, but what's important about it? So I sat down and I came up with the product goal canvas, and I'm just opening it up here right now. That's my thinking. So essentially, again, a product goal is always in the context of an existing vision we have. What is the bigger picture, kind of where do we want to go? And then this is your product goal. And here you would describe what do you want to achieve, and maybe even by when. Let's say by August, we want to be able to sell these items wirelessly at these machines. Then he would then also describe a more detailed description, so the narrative behind that. Why is all of this important? Give people context. Maybe what's really going on and how do we anticipate that? Now, also kind of in the context of EBM, how would we know that it was a good answer? It's like, how would we know that the outcome we have created actually was right? Now, what are the measures we want to see? So maybe again, describe a couple, we want to measure this and this for these reasons, we expect that this should be going up. And then think about maybe how would this goal reflect on the market with your end user? And maybe how would this goal help you to change your internal capabilities? Maybe you have built up some infrastructure which will allow you, maybe some architecture, to move later on a little bit faster. So there's also the difference between leading and lagging. You know, what are the things you can do up front? Leading things is usually stuff the customer doesn't really see. So internal capabilities are usually more leading, and market end user is more lagging. That's after the fact. Maybe there are some risks you want to talk about, you want to address. So what should we be aware of? Keep in mind. Then, you know, work doesn't happen for itself. Somebody has to be to do that. Who is the product owner for that goal? Who are the developers that, and who's the Scrum Master, or several if you have a Nexus setup working on that? And hey, isn't product ownership all about stakeholder management? Isn't our goal to keep our stakeholders happy? So who are our stakeholders? Who are our users? You know, with whom do we have to interact? Whom do we have maybe to invite to our sprint reviews? Make sure that they show up, comment, and give us feedback about how we're doing. Who are influencers? So influencers are people who can really drive the direction of our product. Sales, marketing, maybe a very important person in the organization. Providers is all the ones we are depending from. They develop a component for us. They provide us some services. If they don't deliver, we probably get stuck. Problem again. Governance, laws, regulations, internal governance. Which reports do we have to deliver every quarter, every month? Which numbers do they want to see? And again, external, like GDPR and other things. And I think if you were able to fill out this canvas here, I would think you have a fairly good understanding to what do you want to actually achieve. And I would even go a step further and say, if you don't really know what you want to achieve, please don't be surprised if you don't get to the place. I mean, the good thing is, if you don't know your destination, you wouldn't even realize that you don't reach your destination. But that's often the problem. We have so many things just happening, and we don't really see, are they going actually in the right direction, because we don't know what we are really aiming for. So I think this helps a lot to find the right target.
Great. And some folks are asking if there's a way for them to access that canvas.
Yes, actually, if you go up here, there's the URL. So maybe just Google it, effectiveagile.com, canvases, product goal canvas. I think it should be findable by now. I think Google knows where it is. But otherwise,
I can pull the link and share it.
Yeah, maybe this would be even easier. Yeah.
Yep, I could do that. And in relation to the product goals, someone asked when and how often and in what round do you craft the product goal?
So product goals for me, they are like, I think usually around 6 months out there, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. But this is for me like, okay, what could we achieve in the next half year? So essentially, and maybe say if this could be the next one, but don't, like product backlog refinement, don't spend too much time on what could be in a year. And then once you start working on that and you build your product backlog for that product goal, you refine it, you start executing it, you learn a lot. So I think maybe once a sprint, look at your product goal. Is it still viable? Is it still right? If the answer is yes, oh, crank on, perfect. Maybe you discover some changes. Yeah. Maybe just say, actually, right now it's still a good goal, but right now this is happening. We maybe let's drop the goal and let's come up with a new one. It's the same way like sprint goal. Now, the only reason to cancel a sprint if your sprint goal becomes invalidated, doesn't make sense to achieve that anymore. Now, if you realize your product goal doesn't make sense to be achieved anymore, drop it. With a sprint goal, we cancel the sprint, we start a new sprint. Yeah, drop the product goal, create a new one, create a new product backlog, see what there maybe can be used from the existing product backlog, and start a next sprint.
Okay, great, thanks. Can you explain ways to make goals transparent across the organization? This question comes from Alba.
I mean, the way I think about it, everybody who wants to know or is interested in what we're doing, I would say, hey, sprint review is the place to be. Yeah, you don't just get PowerPoints and other things, you see working product. And my rule of thumb is don't show PowerPoint in the sprint review, show working product. Now, sometimes, I show some things, maybe something is just easy to display using PowerPoint. So always start your sprint review with the vision. Now, this is why we're doing that. This is why we spend all the money for that sprint. This is the vision for the product. And if people say, oh, not again, the vision, you just say it about often enough because it has to really be in people's mind all the times. That is our product goal in the context of the vision we are talking about. This is where we are right now. Maybe you can then also correlate this to the roadmap. Sometimes if I use a story map as a roadmap, just, this is the story map of the product we are building. This is already, maybe you turn them green, those cards. These stories have already been implemented. The other ones here, we did the sprint because this was our sprint goal. This is what we wanted to achieve in the sprint. We wanted to be able that the product can do X, Y, and Z. And hey, they're my developers. They provided now a good showcase about how the new functionality works. So enjoy. And then after that, talk to them again. Just, this is what we have. We think a good next sprint goal would be this. Do you have other thoughts, concerns? Let's talk. It's called a review, not a demonstration, because a demonstration is one way. We show you something and you go. Review is we engage, we talk afterwards. Now, to most people, I really say, if you're not coming to the sprint review, it's your loss. Now, there could be some influencers who are really, really, maybe you can record the sprint review that they can watch it, or maybe you write a summary, or maybe record it and cut it down to 5 minutes and give it to those people. So there could be cases where just, what, some people you just have to spoon feed because it's worthwhile to do that. But overall, it's always the sprint review for me, because this is really the most important place, because this is the transparency where you show working product. And that's the most, because this is real progress. This is reality. This is what you have right now. And we all together inspect that. And based on our inspection, our talking, our finding out what makes sense, we make the right adaptations for the next sprint in our product backlog.
Okay. Great. Next question here. Please keep your questions coming. There's a bunch here. Any that we don't get to, we'll share with Ralph and he'll find a way to answer them for you afterward. So don't hesitate to ask more questions. Someone has a question here about the product backlog items. How detailed should they be, and who decides that? The product owner or the developers?
Great question. So, you know what? If I'm a product owner, I try not to write one single product backlog item, or if you prefer to work with user stories, not a single user story. Because this brings us back to, I give you something and you do it. This becomes a contract. Now, individuals and interactions. Yeah. So basically, I would rather go as a product owner to you and just, what, guys, we discovered a problem here. Please think about a possible answer. And, in 3 days, we have the next refinement, Monday. Do you think you could have something? Yeah, Monday is fine. Okay, let's talk about this next Monday. Now, and hey, there's my product backlog. Work with it. Just keep me. If you change something major, let me know. Now they would come back. You would turn it around. They would think about it. They would come up with an answer. And by doing all that work, they will make it their own problem. They'll get proud about what they're going to do. Now, then you would look at that, talk it through. Oh, this makes sense. This is cool. No, we can't do this because for these reasons, or there's a law. Okay, I need to talk about the law, you explain it and so on. And then maybe they come back and on Thursday you talk about it again. And just, this looks good. Now, whatever they created, whatever they wrote on their own product backlog items, that is their thing. And I don't care what's written on there. If they're okay with one word, that's fine. If they need to write 10,000 words, that's their thing. That's also fine by me. Essentially, the product backlog items or the user stories are pretty much there to jog your memory. Sure, this was this. We talked about this. Let's do that. Now, if you need some documentations for regulatory reasons or some maintenance, operational reasons, that's when the definition of dump comes into the picture. You would make sure for everything we have done at the end of the sprint, there's the right documentation in place, there are the release notes in place, the operational guidelines in place. All of that is covered as well.
Great. We have time for a couple more questions here, maybe one or two more. Have you had situations when a Scrum Master was communicating with the stakeholders, such as situations where the product owner is not performing or similar? Have you seen situations like that? Looks like she's
No,
for some advice here, Sandra.
yes, that's also a great question. So, and this is also one of the things I like in the new Scrum Guide is now they talk less about roles, more about accountabilities. You can really say Scrum is an accountability-driven framework. Now, we have the product owner who's accountable for the product. We have the developers who are accountable for delivering done increments. And then we have the Scrum Master who's accountable for making Scrum working correctly and helping everyone. Now, if one of those accountabilities isn't there, you can pretty much see quickly that this is going to fall apart. Now, if you would have a product owner who is really not, and for me, usually in my trainings, I like to put a crown on the product owner just in the way I like to think about it. I think this is the linchpin. If you have a bad product owner and the world's best developers, you built the wrong product in an outstanding quality, but it's still the wrong product. Now, not having the right product owner is detrimental in most environments which I have seen. Sure, and now this is where the Scrum Master would come into the picture. But then as a Scrum Master, I would even go a step further, because when we talk about developers, we don't talk about JavaScript programmers, or we also talk about business analysts, user experience people. I had mathematicians on they were calculating some growth of corn. Technical writers as we were developing the user manual with the product. Now, all of those skills have to be part of your development team, essentially. Now, as a Scrum Master, I would even then go a step further and just say, well, the product owner isn't doing his or her work with our stakeholders, with our end users, so I'll help the developers talk to them directly. And I don't see anything wrong that a programmer or whatever is talking to a customer directly if it's appropriate.
Okay, great. I hope that helps, Sandra. So let's see. Someone had asked, and others might be wondering this as well, so I'm going to ask it. Anyone's free to use that product goal canvas in their organization, right?
Yes, yes. It's copy. It's up here. It's kind of like the whole copyright thing. It's kind of like all the canvases.
Okay.
It's fair
Great.
use, essentially, yeah.
Okay. And one last question here. Should the developers be allowed to talk directly to end users about the requirements, or does it always have to come through the product owner?
Again, this goes back to who is writing the cards, the stories, the product backlog item. And so, again, I favor that developers go and, again, it's we have to agree on it. Right? Maybe the product owner even introduces, hey, these are my people I'm working with, and from now on, if you have questions or something, please go and talk directly to them. That's absolutely fine by me. Individuals and interactions, take out all those layers, because every time you have a middleman, it's lots of time, lots of information, not good. The only thing which is an absolute no-go is that if you say as a developer, you know what, the product owner gets it wrong. I know how it's supposed to be, and I'm now going to talk to my customer and explain it to them, and then we make it differently. So the moment you take the possibility of talking directly to a customer to bypass the product owner, that's an absolutely no-go. This is what I will not accept. But everything else, absolutely, please.
Great. Well, there are still some unanswered questions here, Ralph, so I'll pass these over to you afterward and we can figure out how you're going to answer those. Thank you, everybody, for sending in these questions. So we are actually just about at our time. So it is time for us to wrap up. Thank you so much, Ralph, for this session, and thank you, George and Agile Actors as well, for joining today. If you want to continue your learning, please feel free to check out the learning paths on the Scrum.org website, and also our other resources, our forums, blogs, videos, etc. This recording will be made available within 24 hours, and you will be sent a link through Zoom. So thank you very much, Ralph. And thanks everybody for joining today.
Thank you. Bye. Good luck.
All right. Bye. Have a great day, everyone.